The Greater Montana Foundation presents Interesting People of Montana. This program is about the man who knew Buffalo Bill. Your host, Ed Craney.
The gentleman that we are speaking about is Mr. James E. O'Connell of Helena, Montana, known to his friends as Eddie O'Connell, and to folks from Minneapolis to Yakima, Washington as Eddie's Bread. Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you very much.
Mr. O'Connell, on these interesting people in Montana programs that we have, we sort of like to have people tell about themselves. Now, we know that you were with Buffalo Bill over in Cody, Wyoming, and we know that you came from there to Helena. Tell us something first about Buffalo Bill, would you please?
Yes, indeed, I'd be pleased to, because it was a pleasure to be even an unimportant member of his staff, such as I was. But I left Omaha in early 1904 to go to Wyoming, Cody, to work for Colonel Cody, and he was opening that year, 1904, two small hotels, Wapiti Inn, which is halfway to Yellowstone Park.
Between Yellowstone and Cody.
And Pahasca Teepee, which was the hotel on the park line. Keep in mind that in those days it was horse and coaches, and you had to have a stop halfway in order to get to Pahasca, which was 60 miles away from Cody, a big day's drive.
We sort of lose sight of that today, where we are able to drive from Helena to Cody without any trouble and have time left over to go other places.
Yes, that's right. No, it was slow travel, but very delightful. And of course, drivers, one of the requirements of good stage drivers was that they also were good entertainers. They told good stories and kept the guests interested, and they had historic places along the highway which they pointed out.
Yes, but we're talking now about Buffalo Bill. What did he have to do with hotels?
He owned the Irma Hotel in Cody and the Pahasca Teepee on the park line, the Wapiti Inn, and also a variety of other interests.
Well, yes, but I thought he was a showman.
He was a showman.
He had shows all over the world, didn't he? Didn't he take his show all over?
Yes, he showed in Europe and the Near East and all across America.
Who ran this operation of hotels and these other things?
His sister was the general manager, May Cody Decker, a woman well past 50, but a brilliant woman and able to make decisions very fast, and she had lots of them to make.
Well, where did she have her office?
If she had an office, Ed, I'm not aware of it. She had a room upstairs, and in her dresser drawer, she kept a series of files in big envelopes. And in those envelopes was the industries which she supervised. As an illustration, a sulfur mine near Cody, a coal mine near Cody, two big ranches, a big cattle ranch, the T.E. Ranch, and a big cattle and hay ranch on the South Fork nearer to town, and a livery stable along with the other things, because at that time a livery stable was a necessity.
And this one woman ran them all?
She made all the decisions, and she sat all day in the hotel lobby in the corner across from my desk. And men came to her for advice and decisions, and she never faltered on decisions. And I said to her one day, after several months of watching her, I said, Aunt May, she was known to all of us as Aunt May. Aunt May, you make decisions all day long, and I marvel at it, and I wonder how you do it. And she said, it's very, very simple. It's wrong or it's right. It's black or it's white. It's good or it's bad, and that's all there is to it.
You know, that's all there is to it. She was an individual.
Yes, she was.
It wasn't one of these, in other words, the Cody show wasn't one of these corporations like we have today where you have management by committees or by board of directors or anything. In other words, Aunt May was it.
On the Wyoming operations, Colonel Cody was it on the show. He knew everything there was to know about the show business.
Well, now, about the show business, who did he run his show direct?
Yes.
He had no manager for
He had a boy that joined him many years previous, who came to him as what he called a tent boy. He shined his shoes and brought the papers. He afterwards became a general manager of the show, but at the same time, in his early training, Colonel Cody had taught him to be a sharpshooter. He was the young man who stood on his
with
head.
a gun?
With a gun, yes. He was a performer and a businessman, and the highest priced man in the circus or show business at that time in America.
Is that so?
Yes.
In other words, Colonel Cody knew how to get the utmost out of
Yes.
people, and is that where you learned that same thing for
still
yourself?
loyalty. I don't know whether I ever learned it or not, but it's very valuable.
Well, we won't get into the Eddie Bread empire at the present time, because let's talk a little bit more about Colonel Cody. You were there in a hotel for him.
Yes, that's right.
And how did you, that's all you worked for him, was in the hotel?
That's all.
And how did you happen to come to Helena?
Well, during my time in the hotel, and of course it happens with everybody that, kind of get acquainted with people. People would say, why don't you come to Spokane? Because the Spokane Hotel, which was at that time quite a hotel, I know you could get a job there. And of course your stock answer would be, well, get me a job, and I'd like that. Get me a job. And that usually settled it. But a gentleman, one of our guests who came regularly to Cody, said, Helena is the town you should be in. It's a good hotel town. There's lots of prospect there, and it's a very, very substantial town. And I said, all right, Mr. Kelly, get me a job, and I'll come. 2 months later, I received a wire. Understand you would like to come to Helena. We have a position for you at the Broadwater Hotel, night clerk, and salary so-and-so. Let us return wire when you can come. And Major Baker was in the hotel.
Now, Major Baker was
the
the
general manager
of the show.
Of show, that's right.
The aunt was doing the work on everything, but he was the general manager of the show.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. And I had, like everybody, a great desire to travel with the show. And I had gotten a job on the show, a very good one, in charge of what they called all of the programs and the life of Colonel Cody.
Well, you were planning to go out on the road with the show.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. And I received, of course, the top commission on all of the literature that was sold by the boys who you called hopping the blues. Now, you're a showman yourself, and you know what it is.
You were going to get in there peddling fast.
Yeah, that's right. And, but I had my tickets and arranged to go to Bridgeport, Connecticut, which was the winter quarters, and the show would open within the next 3 weeks at Madison Square Gardens, which was the great banner of you had to be good to open at Madison Square Gardens, and still do.
Still the same.
Okay. So I received this telegram, and I went up and talked to Major Baker, and I said, look, I don't know what to do. I want to travel with the show, but I don't know the show business. And I like the hotel business. It's a good way to make a living, and if you're kind of good, you're always sure of a place. He looked at me a moment, and he said, well, if you were my boy, I'd tell you stay in the hotel business. Just don't have anything to do with show people. None of us work a full year. And I'm an exception. I'm paid by the year, but everybody else works about 6 months. And they manage to be in debt at the end of the winter 6 months because they borrow and try to get along. But they're all broke, and he said, the circus business isn't for a good, decent young fellow like you. And I thought about it all night, and in the morning I wired Helena, I will come, and I'll be there a week from today, because I had arranged that would be my last week at Cody.
Well, I'll be
So
there.
I came to Helena and went to work at the Broadwater Hotel.
Now, when was that out at Broadwater?
Oh, that was January of 1907.
Had the Broadwater been running for
Broadwater had been closed since Colonel Broadwater had passed away, but it was being opened at that moment and at that time by Mr. James Breen of Butte, Montana, a mining man, and Mr. F. Augustus Heinze, also a mining man, who had done very well in Butte and was aspiring to be United States Senator from Montana.
Had he put more money into
He put more on, refurnished and organized it, and it opened as a very, very
Well, that
fine.
must have been a beautiful hotel in those days.
Just beautiful.
And what about the plunge? Was it there then?
Plunge was open, 150 feet wide, 350 feet long. And on Saturdays, you see, one of my jobs was to be accountable for the cash, especially that from the plunge. But on Saturday and Sunday, we most always during the summer season took in $1,500, which was a lot of money at that time.
How many people lived here in Helena at that time?
I think about 14,000 people.
Well, then, people from Helena, it was really
that was their amusement
center,
place.
Amusement place to them, plus people from all over the state.
That's
came.
right.
Because I remember talking to people who came from Philadelphia and came from New York and had visited the Broadwater. This was sort of a highlight of the trip coming west.
It was elaborately done, and a very, very wonderful crew. They moved up from Hot Springs, all of the dining room crew, excepting the chef. And there were 21 waiters in the dining room, and there are 86 rooms in the hotel, so you know the service had to be good.
The size of that plunge again, did I get it correct?
150 by 350, yes.
Well, that's the size of a city lot. I mean, a city block.
Yes.
Size of a city block.
Which it was.
That's a tremendous plunge.
Yes.
How long did you stay at the Broadwater?
Well, it opened in January and closed in October, and I closed with it.
And then what did you do?
Then I went to Deadwood, South Dakota to work at the Franklin Hotel, and I didn't like it too well in Deadwood. And then I moved from there to Omaha, Nebraska, and I worked at the Millar Hotel.
Well, were you a little sorry about that time that you hadn't gone with the Cody show?
No, I couldn't say so. No, I wouldn't say that. I've always enjoyed meeting the public and knowing what I was doing it.
Well, now, how did you happen to come back to Montana? You'd been here and you'd left, and how did you happen to come back?
In Omaha, I received a telegram from Helena. Your name has been suggested as a possible candidate for a new position which we are creating at the Montana Club. It will be similar to a manager of a small hotel. We would like somebody that can live in the club, and if interested, state salary expected, and
well, was the club of that day, now this would be 1908?
Yes.
1908. This is 1967. Was the club in the same building?
Oh, yes. Yes.
The club was the same building as it is today?
Yes. They had burned the building the same size, 1904, and rebuilt the present club, which is exactly what it is today, and occupied all floors. Only at that time, I believe we catered more to rooms. We had 35 rooms.
I see. Well, what was your deal to come back then to manage the club? How did you work that out?
Oh, well, they said state experience and salary expected. And I had never been in a club, although I thought, gee, that's something I would like to do, because then and now, if you're a good club manager, you have your head above water. You're in a different class. And but I had no experience. I didn't even know what they did in a club. And but when he said work would be the same as manager of a small hotel, I felt at home. And I wired him and I said, I'm anxious to come to Helena, would like to be manager for you at the Montana Club. I'm willing to come to Helena and work for 3 months, and if at the end of that time I'm not satisfactory, you pay half of my fare from Omaha to Helena, which will be $24.58, or odd pennies, whatever it was.
And they never paid half your fare back, huh?
No, they said, come at once. But here was
and then after 3 months, what was the deal?
After 3 months, they asked me to come up to House Committee. And now those days, the House Committee, I believe, was more important than now, although I speak without proper knowledge. But they asked me to come up and said, we are satisfied with your work. What have you been thinking about? We'd like to keep you. What have you been thinking about for salary? And
You'd been working for him for 3 months and getting no
I
salary?
had drawn nothing.
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 People don't do that very much in
Not
1967.
anymore. They won't bet on themselves.
You mean you didn't ask him, when's my vacation?
No, I didn't.
Times have changed.
But this will interest you. When I got on the job, of course, they had sent this same telegram out to a lot of fellas because they had quite a list. And in looking through that big volume of file, I found men of unusual experience in the Minneapolis Club, the St. Paul Club, the Minnesota Club, the California Club. All of them knew that they were qualified for the job, and they knew exactly what they should be paid. I was the only fellow who'd take a chance.
Well, you stayed on, of course, after that, and you made your deal with them. How long did you stay running the Montana Club?
Till 1910.
1910. Well, didn't you go to Missoula in 1908?
1908, my brother and I opened a little bakery. He was
But
a tradesman. He was a baker.
But in 1908, we had a lot of things happening here in Montana.
Oh, yes, we opened the Flathead Indian Reservation then, and
Let's go into that, because you've seen these pictures in movies where they turn the horsemen loose and they run out for the land. I understand that the same sort of thing took place from Dixon.
Yes, it did. Yes.
Over north of Missoula.
Yes. People came from all over, and they registered. Well, we'd say in June they started registering, and then the drawing, it takes place, we'll say, 30th of August.
Well, now what was the drawing for?
Drawing is for
To
the
give them-
privilege
Of running out.
of running out and identifying yourself and a 160-acre tract, I believe, and saying, this is mine.
All right. Now, of the number who came out here, approximately what percentage of them were drawn?
Maybe 5 in 100 were lucky.
5 in 100?
Yes.
You mean 95 people had to go back home?
Yes, and did, unfortunately.
Oh. Well, what kind of a boom town was Missoula?
Missoula was a boom town. There's no question about it.
Well, how did you do with the bread business in the boom town?
We just did remarkable. We started right in with the boom, and for 3 months we couldn't bake enough. We worked night and day, and we couldn't get bread enough out to take care of the trade.
How much was a loaf of bread then in 1908?
Wholesale of 33 loaves for $1.
What?
A little over 3 cents.
33 loaves for $1?
That's right.
Who was your biggest customer?
Well, our biggest customer was on my route, and it was Sam's Cafe on Front Street.
Who was Sam?
Sam was a Chinese restaurant operator, and a very good one. Did very well in the restaurant business, served good meals, and always complaining about the amount of bread that the customers ate. And one morning I said, I'm anxious to get along with him, and always inquiring about his health and business. Now, how are you this morning, Sam? Fine. How's business? Jesus.
He's fine, huh?
2 men eat $1 bread yesterday.
Two men eat 33 loaves of bread yesterday.
That was an exaggeration, but it was his way of saying, I still am getting stuck with my bakers.
Well, good for Sam. Well, now what happened when the bubble burst? When these 95 people out of 100 went home, what happened?
Lots of failures, business failures, bankruptcies, and just impossible to do anything. When we, in the summertime, couldn't bake enough bread, in the wintertime we got down to baking 2 days a week.
Oh.
So you know what happened.
I
came back. I did not intend to stay in Missoula. I intended to come back, which I did. I came back to Montana Club, I believe, in September.
I see. Well, before we leave the Flathead, how long did some of the people stay? As I understand it, a lot of people got land, but a lot of them didn't stay the required length of time.
Yes, that's right.
To get the land. A lot of them just starved out.
That's right.
That is, they were going up there on unirrigated land. The Flathead Valley didn't look in those days anything like it does
No,
today.
not at all. Not
And
at all.
a lot of them just lost out that way. Now, what took place with their land? Have you any idea what took place
Well,
with the land that was given up?
after 2 or 3 ownerships and moving it around, it's finally, like much land in Montana, it's finally got in the hands of the rugged people who could take it and knew something about what to do with it when they had it.
I see. Well, and it's a beautiful valley today.
Beautiful.
Just gorgeous.
Just beautiful.
Well, let's get back now to you and back in the Montana Club. You came back to Helena to the Montana Club, and then how long did you remain there?
I stayed there from September to May of the following year. And when I left, chairman of the House Committee, Mr. Day, whom I admired so very much, such a fine gentleman, and knew exactly what he wanted to do all the time. But he said, you're not going to go up to the... I said, we've bought a restaurant up here on Main Street, and I'm going up there. And he said,
Here in Helena?
Yes. We bought, Mr. Galvin and I, who was the chef at the Broadwater, and the Grandin, or the alternated positions.
Yeah.
Both Mr. Galvin and myself worked for the same people, Capitol Hotel Company, became acquainted and good friends, and he had lots of ability. And Mr. Day said, you don't intend to go up there yourself? And I said, oh, yes, I do, Mr. Day. He said, but you haven't listened to me. He said, we will pay you whatever you think you ought to have. And I said, I appreciate that, but I'd like to try myself out in our own business.
So you then and Eddie O'Connell and Eddie Gallivan went to business together in, was it named Eddie's Cafe then? Did you call it Eddie's Cafe?
It was the Capitol Cafe, and the editor of the Helena Daily Record at that time knew us both, and he wrote the story of our buying the cafe and of our experience and given us well wishes for success. And he said, and of course you know the cafe will be called the Eddie.
And so he really named
it.
Well, that's wonderful. And then how did you get in the bread business? You went to the bread business out of the cafe, didn't you?
Well, in the cafe we wanted to have better French bread and better hard rolls. And in order to do it at that time,
was that the start of your famous Eddie's hard rolls?
That's right. That's
the
start.
Darn.
That's the start.
And this was
1913.
1913.
When we went into the baking end of the business. 1910.
In the 1910 when you went in the cafe,
right.
And the rolls really started then in the cafe.
That's right. That's right. And
they've been going for 57 years then.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. And along with it came the day when people came in to buy rolls and a loaf of bread, and I said to Mr. Galvin, I think...
You sold bread then too?
At our own counter. And we wrapped it in a newspaper.
No.
We didn't even have anything to
See, in those days you didn't cut bread.
Oh, no. No sliced bread, no cut bread, no nothing. No wrappers.
No, just wrapped it in newspaper.
Yes, or gave it to them the way it was. They could put it in their handbag like they do in France.
They do that over in Europe now.
That's right. That's right.
Well, times have changed.
Yes.
Well, then you started in selling rolls right there in Eddie's Cafe.
That's right.
Well,
that's right. Then, in order to get along, and I said to Mr. Galvin, I think we ought to be able to take on some of these retail outlets. At that time, we had in Helena some very good stores, Reineck and Company up on State Street, R.C. Wallace on Main Street, Turner and Company over on across from what's now the YWCA. And he said, well, if you think so, but I don't like it. That looks like...
He was doing the cooking.
Yes, yes. He thought
you were just doing the selling.
Yeah. He said, I think we shouldn't do it. We got lots to do now. And I said, well, but we're getting along all right, and the problem is to keep getting along.
Well, who won out?
Well, he said finally, well, go ahead, hoping, I think, that I wouldn't get any accounts. But I went out and sold all.
Sold everybody in town.
That's right.
And then, following that, in 1913, you opened what has become Eddie's Bakery.
Yeah, that's right. In what is now the present-day bakery building.
Here
we put in a large brick oven to make the real type of French bread.
How many loaves of bread could you make a day then?
Oh, I suppose.
Back in 13.
2000.
Is it much larger than that now?
Oh, yes. In all of Eddie's, of course, we tried to do 1 million loaves a week, and most always did.
Is that so?
Yes.
And speaking of that, how many Eddie's bakeries are there? Across, they stretch, as I understand it, from Minneapolis to Yakima?
That's right.
And how many are there?
Well, they have since discontinued some of them, but at the top, under our management, we had 16.
You had 16 bakeries
That's
altogether,
right.
and what year did you sell out the Eddie Bakery?
Sold out in 57.
And you haven't been doing a thing for 10 years?
Well, I've been trying to keep busy. And it's not too hard.
Mr.
I enjoy
O'Connell,
working.
Mr. O'Connell is probably one of the busiest men in Montana. He not only takes care of his business, but like some of the others of us, maybe he has a reputation of taking care of everybody else's. Well, the bread business was really then a development out of what should have been selling programs and
Yes,
hawking
that's right.
programs at Buffalo Bill's
Yes.
Wild West show,
Yes.
as it were. And it instead of selling a million programs, you turned out a million loaves of bread all the time. Well, tell us some of the fun experiences that you've had in making bread in Montana.
Well, it has been delightful. It's been delightful to be in a business that you understand. Maybe I ought to tell you this. You see, my mother's people were all bakers in Ireland and still are.
Is that
Still
so?
are, yes.
Still
Yes.
bakers over in Ireland?
Yes. And my brother practically...
Well, you sort of got this from heredity then.
Well, yes, you absorb it as you go along. That's right. That's right. But been many, many delightful things happen. And, of course, there always has to be a few heartaches, too.
Oh, of
But
course.
all in all, the world has been very wonderful to me, and the baking business very, very wonderful.
How many different kinds of bread?
About 28.
28. And how many different? You've made fruit cake.
Yes.
And specialized in fruit cake that I know has been shipped all over the world.
Yes, that's right.
But you've made other things besides.
Full line of cakes
besides-
also, about 20, 21 numbers.
About 21 numbers of those.
Mhm.
And what kind of bread sells the best? What particular loaf of bread sells the best?
In America, of course, pan bread, the large white. And it's
The large
far
one.
away the big seller.
It is.
It's about
And
60%
and
of your
all
volume.
of these things that you make, all the little pastries that you make, what is the best seller there?
Well, the small numbers now, the numbers that children buy,
I see.
10 and 15 cents.
Oh, those little packages.
Yes.
They're the big sellers.
And for two reasons. One is that's a nice lunch bucket size, and also children.
And it isn't wrapped in newspaper.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. I'll tell you, you asked for interesting experiences. We were quite sizable in the wholesale bread business, but had never made a cake. We called ourselves bread bakers, and we thought we were in good. But the day came when competition was selling cake and bread together against us. And we had to go into the cake business. And we went up on Park Avenue, where our cake shop is now. And we started in a little room about 50 by 90 and undertook to install proper cake ovens and proper equipment, one thing and another. And we started that operation started trying to do it about March of 1929. And we just got opened September 1st of 1929, and the panic hit in 29 days later, and you couldn't give a cake away, let alone sell one. So for 3 years, we struggled, and boy, we learned about the cake business. If there's one good way to learn a business is to have it losing money all the time.
If there's one good way to learn anything, it's in the Depression.
That's right. That's right.
Well, speaking of cakes, what is the best-selling cake?
Well,
What kind of cake sells the best?
the white and yellow cakes.
They
The
sell the best.
standard, the
I see.
standard that the housewife has made for many, many years.
Well, you always made a very delicious angel food cake
Oh,
that was
yes.
a favorite
Oh,
of
yes.
mine.
Yes.
But
yes,
I thought maybe you were going to say that.
yes.
Let me ask you, where did most of the flour come from for your bread and things like that?
All Montana product, and I suppose that is one of the reasons why we had a reputation which they still sustain. Montana is known for the finest bread wheat in the world, and we specialize.
That's this hard winter wheat that
That's
we
the
have?
hard spring.
Hard spring wheat.
That's right. That's right.
Well, where did I get the idea that it was hard winter? Is there a hard
There
winter?
is a hard winter, and now many ranchers have a percentage of winter and a percentage of spring. It does better winter for the strip farming,
I
which we
see.
have nowadays.
But the hard spring wheat
That's right.
is
That's the one that has the flavor.
Well, folks, you've learned something about making bread tonight. You've learned something about Eddie O'Connell's way to make bread. You've learned something about an individualist's way of making a great success in the state of Montana. And you've learned a little bit about a man who knew Buffalo Bill and worked for him, Mr. J.E. O'Connell of Helena. And thank you very much for being with us. Goodbye.
Interesting People of Montana is a presentation of the Greater Montana Foundation.